At first, a flock is just a gray crowd, moving together, pecking together, vanishing together. But look closer, and the crowd begins to break apart. One bird has the same markings, the same habits, the same return. Welcome to the Pigeon Mind. Stay until the end, because it may have been one bird all along. When you look at a flock of city pigeons, they all seem completely identical to you. A gray blur of birds, indistinguishable one from another, just bobbing and pecking. So you assume that the pigeon you see today is a different one from yesterday. You think you are simply seeing an endless parade of anonymous and completely interchangeable birds. But here is the quiet twist that almost nobody ever stops to consider. The pigeon at your window today may be the very same one you saw last week. What looks like a crowd of strangers may really be a few familiar regulars, and that one bird you keep dismissing may have been with you all along. You see them as identical only because you have never truly looked closely. Because every single city pigeon is in actual fact a unique, distinct, and recognizable individual. So how do you learn to tell these supposedly identical birds apart from each other? The answer will completely change how you see every flock from now on. First, let us understand why pigeons seem so identical in the first place. Part of the real reason for this is simply the way that human attention naturally works. Your busy brain constantly filters the whole familiar world down into simple, broad categories. It quietly files all pigeons under one single broad label, simply gray city pigeon. Once it is labeled that way, your mind stops even bothering to notice the small differences. This is actually a known effect that psychologists have studied carefully for many years. We are simply not used to seeing pigeons as separate and genuinely distinct individuals. There is also a very real effect where unfamiliar kinds of faces all tend to look alike. We even see it with unfamiliar people too, when they happen to belong to an unfamiliar group. With a little practice though, the sameness quite quickly and surely begins to fall away. The differences were always there, you simply never trained yourself to see them. And it turns out that pigeons vary far, far more than most people ever truly realize. Once you really know what to look for, no two pigeons ever look quite the same. So let us now learn exactly which features set each individual bird truly apart. The first and most striking difference of all is the pigeon's whole overall plumage pattern. City pigeons come in a genuinely surprising range of different colors and patterns. This wide variety exists because they descend from many, many different domestic breeds. Centuries ago, people carefully bred pigeons into countless different colors, shapes, and patterns. When those birds went feral, all that variety spilled into the city streets. So even today, a single ordinary flock can hold many quite distinct color types. The classic blue bar pigeon is gray, with two dark bars across each wing. The checker pigeon has a busy speckled pattern across its wings and back. Some are nearly all black, while others are pale, dusty gray, or even a soft reddish brown. Some birds are pied, splashed quite boldly all over, with large irregular patches of white. And some are almost pure white, standing out very brightly against the rest of the flock. These broad color types are really the easiest first step in telling individual birds apart. Just by color and pattern alone, you can already begin to pick out clear individuals. That one dark checkered bird suddenly stands out from the plainer gray crowd. Once you have learned the broad colors, you can start to notice the much finer details. Look closely at the iridescence, that shifting shimmer of color around the pigeon's neck. That patch glows with green, purple, and gold, shifting in the changing light. and the exact size and shape of that bright shimmer varies clearly from one bird to the next. Some pigeons have a broad, brilliant collar, while others show only a faint gleam. Next, look very closely at the pigeon's eye, which is often a striking and vivid orange. But the eye color varies too, from bright orange to deep red to a pale, duller tone. A young pigeon, on the other hand, often has a darker, grayish-brown eye instead. Then notice the cere, that small, fleshy patch, sitting just above the pigeon's beak. The cere is usually white, but its exact size and brightness can differ clearly between birds. Look too for any old scars, small bald patches, or any unusual twisted feathers. Many city pigeons will also have distinctly damaged or even completely missing toes. A particular little limp or a deformed foot can mark out one single bird unmistakably. Even small feather wear and different molting patterns can make each bird look slightly different. Stack all these features together, and each individual pigeon suddenly becomes clearly unique. What seemed like one gray mass resolves into a crowd of distinct individuals. Beyond just their looks, pigeons also differ greatly in their behavior and their personality. Some birds are very bold and confident, pushing right up close to your feet. Others are shy and cautious, always hanging back at the flock's nervous edge. Some are quite aggressive at food, while others seem to politely wait their turn. These little personalities turn out to be surprisingly stable and remarkably consistent over time. So a bird's behavior becomes yet another reliable clue to its individual identity. That one pushy, fearless bird may be the very same confident individual daily. Pair its bold behavior with its markings, and you can be sure it is the same. Soon you really start to recognize the regulars not as a flock at all, but as familiar faces. You notice the same brave bird, the same shy one, the same scarred old veteran. And gradually, the once anonymous flock slowly dissolves into a whole cast of characters, each one with its own distinct look, its own habits, and its own small story. Now here is something that is even more remarkable about these supposedly identical little birds. If you struggle to tell pigeons apart, the pigeons themselves certainly do not. To another pigeon, every single bird in the flock is a clear and distinct individual. Pigeons recognize each other quite easily by sight and also by their particular calls. A mated pair knows each other almost instantly, even in a large, crowded, busy flock. They reunite quite reliably, picking out their own partner from among hundreds of similar birds. Pigeons also form among themselves a clear social order, a kind of gentle pecking order. And that whole order only works if each individual bird knows exactly who is who. They each clearly remember who outranks them, who to avoid, and who they can safely challenge. This quietly requires recognizing dozens of separate individuals reliably and consistently over a long time. So while you see a gray blur, they see a community of known faces. Their social world is rich with identity in a way we rarely imagine. The very birds that you cannot tell apart actually know each other intimately well, and many of them may also quietly recognize and remember you as well. But here, as always, we should pause and stay carefully and clearly honest. Recognizing individual pigeons does take some real practice, and it is honestly never perfect. Even seasoned experts can sometimes confuse two very similar birds, especially at a distance. And many of the plainest gray pigeons genuinely do look remarkably alike to anyone. So we should not pretend that every bird is instantly easy to identify. The point is simply that individuals exist if you patiently look for them. And the pigeons reading each other are using senses far sharper than ours. We are simply late and clumsy students of a skill they were born with. Still, with a little patience, you genuinely can learn to know them as real individuals. And that one simple shift quietly changes everything about how you see a whole flock. So the next time you see a flock resist the urge to see just gray birds, pick out one bird and study it the way you would study a face. Note its overall color, its wing pattern, and the shimmer of color around its neck. Look at its eye color, its cere, and any scars or missing toes. Watch closely how it behaves, whether it is bold, shy, pushy, or perfectly calm. Then give that bird a name and see whether you spot it again. Return to the same spot at the same times and watch for your bird. You may genuinely be amazed at just how often the very same individual bird reappears. That regular bird at your window was never really just a random series of strangers. It was one bird, a familiar individual, returning to you again and again. And once you can see it, you can never again unsee the individuals. The old gray blur slowly becomes a whole neighborhood full of familiar, feathered faces. You will walk right among the pigeons and finally begin to recognize your own regulars. No longer a faceless crowd, but a cast of birds you genuinely know. So the city pigeons were never really the identical gray crowd you always believed them to be. Every bird carries its own pattern, its own colors, and its own quirks. Each one has its own behavior, its own rank, and its own small story. And to one another, they are not identical at all, but vivid individuals. The sameness was never in the birds, it was only in your eyes. You had simply not yet learned the slow and patient art of truly looking at them. This is not affection, it is not magic, and it is not your imagination. It is simply the plain truth that every single animal is a genuine, distinct individual, and that one familiar little bird really has quietly been with you all along, returning faithfully to your window, your balcony, or your own quiet corner of the street, quietly becoming part of your daily life, while you kept mistaking it for a stranger. So I will leave you with one simple thing to try this very week. Find a spot where pigeons gather near your home or your daily route. Choose just one bird with a clear and distinctive feature and then learn it well. Carefully note its color, its markings, its eye, its feet, and its everyday behavior. Then simply watch over several patient days and see whether the same bird returns. Tell me exactly where it happened and what single feature finally gave your bird away. And tell me whether you realized it had been one bird all along. Because once you finally learn to truly see the individual, you simply cannot go back. The old faceless flock slowly becomes a whole gathering of birds you truly know. And the bird you ignored as one of many becomes singular and known. So slow right down just once and meet the single individual hidden in the crowd. You may well find that you had a familiar little companion that you never even noticed. It was one bird all along, quietly and patiently waiting for you to finally see it.